show, I'm trying to establish myself so that you know my bias. I'm trying to actually tell you what is Java Academy. I'm trying to summarize, give you a problem outline, like why I think this program is necessary for pretty much everybody in the room and their dog. And I'm trying to actually summarize why I think it's awesome. So a couple of practical points like what worked, what didn't work, what was supposed to work, and I truly believed it will, but it didn't. And so let's move on. So for brevity's sake, I assume that you do agree that something is wrong with the current process, that actually taking a potential candidate and transforming him into an employee for your company, for some reason there is some dissatisfaction. Perhaps it's, I don't know, number of facts actually, like that your current hiring process is not really the best, or you would like to improve it, to tweak it. But, for instance, one of those reasons or any other reason actually is something that you number of times found yourself wishing to change. So perhaps it's you would like to get rid of some colleagues faster. You would like to actually say yes to prospective customers, candidates, sorry, to prospective candidates because you believe that they have potential. However, in 1 hour that you were given, you didn't actually find this potential soon enough. So you can't say yes, because honestly, well, if you say yes, then if they don't fill up this potential that you spotted, then you're in trouble and your team is in trouble. So you're saying no, because frankly, you should say no if you're having any doubts. So, number of reasons. Perhaps you have your own reason. Perhaps you would like to rearrange the list. That's absolutely fine. Now, I also assume that you don't have time to teach while you work, because teaching is really actually time-consuming. You need to prepare for the teaching, you need to actually teach, and you need to later verify the results of your teaching. So, time-consuming. If you also are actually paid for doing another job, like being a software developer for a project, then, yeah, there is a little conundrum here. Perhaps you dislike the fact that capacity planning seems to be a foreign concept for talent acquisition people. Perhaps you would like actually the budget to be, you know, taken into account a bit earlier. Perhaps you would like that. Perhaps you actually have other problems, like for example, you have this awesome candidate, and you would like him to actually be hired. Unfortunately, he cannot be hired because despite clearing all the technical hurdles, despite being, you know, like the best in a year, your budget is actually frozen. Thank you, goodbye, Mr. Good Candidate. So, a number of reasons that things might go wrong. Number of reasons perhaps, and summarizing, you believe that something is wrong with the hiring process, you would like it to be better. Perhaps nothing is wrong, perhaps it works, but you would like it to be improved. So, with all that said about the hiring process, I will not talk about how to change it. I'll talk about how to actually do something better. So all those points on my slide currently, I will not cover them because actually Java Academy deals away with that. If you will have Java Academy, your recruitment process will naturally evolve. So that's 2 birds with 1 stone. So, teaching about sad truths and about Java in a moment. So, teacher always takes his work home. This is number 1 fact that you need to know. If I actually gave my students a task and they completed this task, I do not know whether they did or not until I check it. So the checking is something that is very, very time consuming. So whenever you're actually taking people and making them learn something, you need to later verify that they learned something. And this is something that takes your valuable time. So rarely will you have the opportunity to have, you know, tools with auto-grading. Like, for example, give them a test and let the tool verify that they actually completed the test properly. Give them, you know, set of questions about Java and actually find out that they learned about Java. So, when I had my first Java Academy, I realized that I'm working like 12 hours a day. And that was pretty normal for 2 weeks. So if you actually want to have, you know, a dedicated learning program, you ought to have a dedicated person to do this. Don't ever think about one person doing 2 jobs. The other thing is that it's a full-time job and it requires several skills. Like, for example, you don't just you cannot just have the hardware skills, the technical skills. You also need the soft skills. You also need to spot that your student is having a problem with the way you phrase the task, or perhaps they do not understand what is actually being written and what is actually being demanded out of them. So all in all, the problem is that you need to learn yourself how to teach others, which actually took me some time. So sad truth is most of us do not know how we learn. Like when you are about to, step out of comfort zone, when you're about to actually take a swing at something that you never did before, then is when you're out of comfort zone, when you're actually, whatever you've built up so far may or may not help you. It actually may go against you. So a number of us do not know when our comfort zone ends, and we never bother because it's uncomfortable. The problem with leaving the comfort zone is it really isn't comfortable. When it's not comfortable, we tend to back away subconsciously. So you may not even realize that you're backing away from the problem. So when you yourself need to actually find out how others are learning, this becomes a bit problematic. The second part is when you fall back to literature, to theory, you find out that there is this so-called learning styles theory. Like some people, they are great learners if they are permitted to walk. Like, so perhaps this will be that, okay, rich gesticulation, body language, physical activity, and this way it makes things easier for them to remember. The problem with this is it's not really verified. So I guess everybody here would point out to one or two friends or colleagues who are actually like that person. But this was never verified. So the learning styles theory, which actually tells that some people are, visuals appeal to them very strongly. Some people like audio. Their ears are the primary sense when learning, and some people, are kinesthetic. So these folks who actually need to move their body while learning. There is no conclusive study that actually verifies that theory. Yet it permits most of the books that I read about learning and teaching. Like you need to select your teaching style and make it appropriate for your students. And for number of actually months, I was following that recipe. And I was kind of frustrated because one, nobody really never knew how they like to be taught, like whether they like to move their body or hear or whatever. And I couldn't really blame them. Also, I noticed that pretty much when I adopted universal learning method, the other people started, filling in what they were missing. So the gaps that I left, they filled out on their own. So actually, I found out that I didn't need to bother. So that's good for you, not so good for me back then. One of your better folks, and I mean better overall, he will be the teacher. How it works. So let's say that you're teaching on a project, like pretty much most of us do. You're hiring the new guy comes, and the new guy is supposed to, be taken care of somehow, without really clear guidelines how it will look like. So what will happen in the end, that your best person will be the teacher. Why? Because everybody will gradually and naturally fall to that person. A, he's smart. B, he's clearly the best because the group dynamics will indicate so. When he will speak on the stand-up, others will listen. If he will actually say something, others will pay attention. So naturally, the new people will realize that they will pick up on that. So they will go to him. And he will be the one who will end up being saddled with also taking care of them, answering their questions and all that. So you lose your best person if you do not select a teacher. If you do not have a dedicated teacher, your best people will become the teachers, which is they will actually be no longer able to perform as they performed. Natural. And yeah, the last line. When you teach people, like, as it happens, you're just making it that far. You're losing on number of things. It's like, yeah, within several minutes, when I enter the room and there is a group I'm supposed to train from, say, any technical aspect, on pretty much any aspect, within first several minutes, I can tell who among this group will walk out of this training enriched, and who is just there to fill in the gaps. I can tell this pretty easily. So whenever you're actually having people join your project and you're leaving to their own devices, then those who are eager, those who are great, they will actually learn a lot because they don't need anybody to learn. If they have, however, somebody to rely on and help them with learning, they will learn a great deal more. So you're losing on a potential really staggering growth. So, my name is Tomasz Borek. First of all, you need to know that I'm a child of the teacher. When I was younger, I watched my mother, who was actually constantly bringing her work home. I watched how much time she spent on actually grading the tests, on actually checking the assignment, things like that. I actually knew from the very young age how to take a look at tests, and at some point I started also helping my mother, and that was when I discovered that people are cheating. Because this one guy had the same answer to this question as this other guy, and I caught him. So I was like 5 years old, and it was an achievement. And obviously I was very angry at that person. How could he cheat my mother? You cannot cheat my mother, come on. So obviously I would grade him harshly, yeah, like immediately. And I was grading him harshly because, well, first of all, obvious thing, he acted against my mother, a sacred existence. And the other point is, I was able to catch him, okay? So he wasn't really good at cheating. So those are two things that I learned at a very young age. Also about, the background of the teacher's job. The other point is that I'm actually self-taught. So I'm not a theorist. I discovered the learning styles theory by accident. Okay, I wasn't actually, looking for it. So I'm not a very well-learned person. I'm not having educator's background. I'm not one of those guys who actually, spent several years in the academia and they can tell you all about it. Nope. I'm really more into practical results. So for me, when I actually started teaching people, that was because I wanted them to be better. I wanted them to know things which I wanted them to know, so that I wouldn't have to answer their questions about those things because they were bloody obvious. That was my motivation. Yeah. So my first official training for which I actually earned money happened in 2013. And prior to this, I was training my other colleagues as my normal capacity. So somebody realized that, okay, Tomek, you're good with Git. Go and give a Git training to those newcomers. Okay, I will. But my first true training for which I earned money was in 2013. And I've been actually earning money by training people ever since then. So it's like 3 years of, commercial experience and some results. So in my training, I always, since the very first one, I always use a specific gradation system. I always ask people, please rate my training from 1 to 10, where 10 is, I don't see any way for you to improve. It's not, it was perfect. It was, currently, I don't see any way for you to improve. This is my 10. And then, on that rating, I've only once got a 2, and then my next best grade is 6. So I believe I'm rather good at what I'm doing. Though perhaps those people were just polite. That's always open to interpretation. Java Academy is something I've did twice so far, 2 times in 2016, and now we'll begin the 3rd edition on the starting date is 19th July. June, not July. So with this, I believe I've established myself, so it's time to talk about Java Academy, about the facts, about what helped, about what didn't help, and summarize all the things. First of all, we have a customized recruitment process for the Java Academy. That is, pretty much all recruitment comes through me. That's it. That's the customization. Now, the facts are, it's 3 months long. It's actually 8 hours a day. The other important thing is 1 month for foundations, 1 month for intermediate topics, and 1 month for closing. Every single month has a project. So yes, they are learning, but they are supposed to employ what they learned in those projects that they are given. 8 hours a day is actually a lie. This is something I say during the recruitment, that judging from the previous experiences, if you really wish to squeeze the most out of that experience, expect that your social life is going down the drain for like 3 months. Because that's honestly is what happens. If I have a person who is really willing to put in the hours, they will put in the hours, and then they will show results. And this in turn has excellent result on pretty much everybody else, because they see that, oh my God, insert name here is already so far ahead, I need to catch up. And that is awesome. We pay, they learn, and vacations are included. So the vacations are pretty much my vacations. So if I ever have vacations, since I'm the only teacher for the entire Java Academy, then Java Academy gets vacations as well. They're usually kind of semi-forced, but sometimes they get the task. So while I say it's 3 months, the practical reality is 3 months plus some days, quite often. We pay them. That's actually sometimes people do not believe it, but this is actually the case. I had questions when people were saying like, okay, so how much do I pay you? And I was answering, we are not the bootcamp. Because the bootcamps, they have actually other business model, because they do it to earn money, okay? If they don't, they'll go out of market. So in our case, we do it because we want to train people, and I do it because I want them to know things. So yes, we pay them, not the other way around. And this is something that I learned. I had a friend. My friend started a company. The company actually started doing really well. At some point, they wanted to hire people, so they employed a recruitment agency, a so-called talent agency. And the talent agency actually contacted me and asked me to work for my friend. I decided, heck, it will be interesting. I'll pretend I'm interested, and I'll go in like that, and then I'll tell my friend how it really looks from the other side. And oh my God. So that was the day when part of my illusions died, because the talent agency told me pretty much everything I needed to know. So if you employ talent agency, you might want to do something like this to verify how it works for you, because for my colleague, this didn't work at all. So I was prepared for the interview before I actually even learned what the company was, okay? So I knew what the company was because I knew my friend, and I knew who he employed and what actually was the words that he had given them. So I knew when they started advertising that, okay, it's this company, it's my friend's company. But before I ever learned officially the name of the company, I already knew what will be my first 4 questions during first interview. And yeah, they weren't wrong. They were actually quite accurate. So from what I learned since then, it seems like this is sadly a regular occurrence. So if you're employing a talent agency, if you're actually spending money on them, then most likely they want to look good. So most likely, it's actually very likely, that they will employ some strategies to prepare their candidates so that their candidate will look good. Now, the problem is how this ties with Java Academy. With Java Academy, I don't need to care about this. Okay? I really don't, because I will accept that person if he is good enough, and I will keep them, and I will train them. And during the training, I will learn about them. So whether they are prepared, whether they have artificially boosted their skills, their CV, I don't really care. Dedicated teacher and trainer. So this ties with actually how hard the teacher's job is. And honestly, yeah, you can't have it that easy. You can't have a developer and a teacher on the side. Truly, you can't. Teacher's work is not done with the lesson. One is not enough. So this sentence depends on the group. If you have 5 people to 8 people, 1 would probably be quite enough, okay? If you have less than 5, even a person who never has done any teaching, they could probably manage. It will be tiring for them, it will be exhausting for them, but they will probably manage. If you have more than 10, you're screwed as a teacher, okay, officially. Imagine a very simple case. Let's say that the first 2 rows here are my students. I will be actually quite honored to have you guys as students. So let's say that first 2 rows here are my students, and one of them is having a technical problem. Now we're talking junior people here, so obviously some problems will require the attention of the teacher. So let's say I walk in and we spend 20 minutes on this problem. What the other people are doing in the meantime? Now imagine that you have 3 questions at the same time. How do you possibly answer all of them? So one teacher is clearly not good enough, because if you have too large a group, well, all right. I'll tell about my program more in the teaching, but do never relinquish the authority. You're taking the responsibility for those people as a teacher, so do not relinquish the authority. You need to be able to actually wield some of it. You don't need to have the firepower, but you need to have at least strong influence over the firepower. 19, 16, and 15 people. These are the sizes of the groups. So when I tell you that over 10 is too much, I really tell from experience. I'm battling every day to actually, lower this number, because I truly believe that my capacity ends at 12 people. If I group people in pair programming, if I give them exercises, if I actually appoint some of them to act as some sort of lieutenants for me, like if you wish to check your Java skills, first go through this person. If you wish to check your Git, first go through that person. If I do that, I'm able to handle 12 people with some experience. But that is very taxing. Finally, this is what they do. So the program is actually full programming course. Java, obviously, a little bit of Java EE, Spring Hibernate, yes, by all means, pure SQL, yes. We're trying to have one SQL and one NoSQL database. This actually works out differently for the groups. I'm trying to teach them about code quality, so they touch Jenkins, they touch Git, they touch Maven, they touch sometimes Gradle. We do some multi-threading, we do some JVM. I'm showing them, for example, how to read logs from the garbage collector. So the scope is broad. If they do projects, and they always do projects, they do it with tests, they do it with, they have to do it Mavenized and all that. Now, this sounds very impressive, but there is one underlying truth to that. If I would not impose tools upon them, I would not have time to grade and check their work. Because without Git, without Maven, without tools that I have for this, I would be unable to find the time. What works? Motivation, responsibilities, there's strict and known rules, questions and retrospective, so pretty much things to revise your program, things to let you find out what you're doing and how you're doing and how you should do better, what they like, what they dislike, what they think, best of all. Rewards, working in groups. So a bit about those. I would say that motivation tramples all. A bit about motivation in just a moment. Responsibility is theirs. I tried guiding people, like taking care of everybody, the nice feeling that we have that everybody who is at the starting line is there at the finish line. And this will work sometimes, not every time. There are people who just don't want to learn, despite saying that they do. And there are a number of good reasons for that. It's not like they're being lazy. Sometimes it's, they're not really ready. For example, I had a person whom I really wanted to train as a programmer and who really wanted to become a programmer, but he was very slow. He was very slow, and he had this awesome way of learning, that is, he tried to categorize everything. It was purely awesome, and when he finally did, he was able to, recall really minor details which escape everybody else, but it was very slow. So in the time I was given, I didn't find the opportunity to find out the way to correctly teach that person. So as a teacher, that was my failure. Strict and known rules. if they do not know the rules, they will ask for them. At least that was my luck so far. If I forgot to clarify what is the exact schedule for next week, there would be people coming over to me and saying, you know, because I would like to plan this and that, could you please tell me when the lectures will happen or when will we be touching this or that topic? So if they knew, for example, that there is an English day and everybody is supposed to speak English, and if they don't, they are going up to the ninth floor without the elevator, then yes, they properly talked in English, and if they started talking in Polish, it would be like, like, yes, I know, ninth floor. Yeah, so strict rules work, because if you're strict, they will adapt. If you're lenient, they'll be strict. That's how it works. Peoples are, you know, constantly shifting the boundaries. So if you set the boundaries, there will be people who will try to push just in case, because it works in the past. It worked with previous teachers. It worked with previous partners, whoever. So they will try to push. They will try to change your rules a bit. So this is when the strictness comes in, because you most likely set the rules not just for the heck of it, but because you really needed them. Questions, retrospectives, revising what happened. Now this is extra important because, honestly, in a situation like this, when I'm one and you're many, I honestly have no clue what you're thinking. Perhaps you're just like itching to get out of here and, oh my God, let this boring man talk to somebody else for a change. Yeah? Perhaps you're actually thrilled with what I'm saying, perhaps this is actually, you know, so-so. I honestly can only guess without talking to you, without learning your thoughts. So this is when retrospectives, Q&A sessions, this is where one-on-one meetings and other forms of actually getting into the heads of your students must be employed. Because without that, you will never know what troubles them. A fair example is, I actually had a group of introverts. And this group of introverts, some of them were truly brilliant, but I didn't know how to talk with introverts that much, okay? I'm a rather extroverted person. So when I was pushing, they would be stepping back, you know, like avoiding my questions, thinking, or, I don't know. What don't you know? What is unclear? I wanted answers. I needed answers. So without actually giving them some opportunity to, some outlet for the frustration, doubts, and so on, I wouldn't have learned a number of things. So I employed a couple of mechanisms for this. One, I had a very good student in the first edition. I asked him to stay as sort of assistant teacher for the second edition. He was one of the students still, so he was able to mingle with the group. I got invaluable information, insider's information. So both sides profited. Rewards. It's very good if you actually publicly praise them. If you can give them small rewards, I don't know, some sort of badge, some sort of recognition, +1 on the Stack Overflow. All those things actually work. And they work because we feel that we have been appreciated with something more tangible than just words. Even sometimes your words are good enough. If you will recognize that you have actually become an authority figure when they will start doing things so that you would praise them. That would be a really awesome sign that you're succeeding. Working in groups. So if they work alone, they cannot get the habits of anybody else. If you want somebody to improve, pair them with somebody good. If you want to find out what is a problem with some person, change their group, make them uncomfortable. Because when they're uncomfortable, they start acting. And when they start acting, you have tangible ways of seeing what were they uncomfortable with. And this is motivation tramples all. A simple case. One of the technically weakest candidates for the first edition. His major, art history. Okay? He majored in art history, then he actually went for, becoming a programmer. Sorry. He went for becoming a programmer because he realized that as a programmer, he would earn much better money and he would be able to sustain his family. Because as an art historian, he was already climbing the academics career ladder, but that was A, awfully slow, B, really not satisfying when it came to money. So his motivation for switching to programming were rather deeply rooted in reality. However, he actually liked programming. Both of this coupled with extremely strong motivation. So he was the one guy who, when I asked him technical questions, he answered like, his answers were among the weakest of all people I've recruited, and I've recruited over 40 people. So this is not a small group. And in the end, he was the one who asked the best questions about the program. He wanted to know the most about it, and he was interested the most about it, and he kept asking. He kept coming back with questions. So I knew he was interested. I knew he was interested. You could hear it in the way he carried himself, the way he talked. So I decided, okay, let's hire the guy. 2 weeks in Java Academy, I've told them about the good books, and Hostman was one of the books that I mentioned. Now, for those of you who do not know, Hostman and Connell have written a Fundamentals of Java book, which is like 1,000 pages long. Monday stand-up. Everybody's talking about what they're doing. Then my art historian comes along and says, well, I read Hostman. And the other guy is like, what, entire Hostman? And the art historian is like, yeah, what about it? 1 weekend, 1,000 pages. You can do it if you want. So the other case, I'm talking about, for instance, design patterns. And I got carried away. I started talking to people who have like a month of experience in programming about the enterprise bus. Yeah, crazy. And the end of the week, because that happened on Tuesday, this guy comes to me and he says, well, I tried implementing what you were talking about. Is this it? Yeah, pretty much. Nice work. Yeah. So motivation tramples all. Give me a person who's motivated and without skills, and a person who's not really motivated, but they have skills. I'll take the motivated guy all day long, 24/7. The other case with motivation is I had the guy who was a developer, not a software developer. He was a normal developer, you know, from the building and all that. So he decided that building is actually very stressful because there is always a deadline. Yeah, like we don't have that. So he decided that he will change his career to something more profitable and more engaging and all that. So he went and decided to ask which language is more popular. So he did his research, and it actually came up that it was Java. So he decided to follow his own logic, and he was like, he came to several forums and he asked the same question. What is the most difficult thing in Java that when you're learning it? And everybody answered him, multi-threading. So here I have a guy on my I think third or fourth talk, and he presents to me, without any prior working history, he presents to me a concurrent parking simulation. With Java util concurrent, because wait and notify were too tedious. So motivation tramples all. With motivation, you can do miracles. Now, pedagogical patterns. This is something I discovered. And this actually also ties with repetitio and mater studiorum. So repetition is the mother of all study. And if you wish for your people to, you know, for your students to learn, repeat things over and over again. Now, the other interesting thing is that when you're having your students and you don't know this, you will not be able to use all the experience of other educators. So there is a book about pedagogical patterns. There are like 52 of them, and a number of them are actually, you know, rooted in common sense. For example, enable your class to make mistakes and point them out in such a way that everybody benefits from it. Give them a task with mistake and actually allow them to discover why is it a mistake. So pedagogical patterns are actually very nice to do, to have, to learn from. There is an excellent website which details 14 pedagogical patterns aimed at Java learning. So pretty much what you want. Yeah? I discovered it like, what, 8 weeks ago? So as you see, I'm rather the intuitive type, not a theorist. Gamification. Number of times I actually brought in a whiteboard and I took 2 people whom everybody knew they were good, and I gave them the same task. Go, and whoever first delivers the working solution, he's the winner. Yeah? And then they would race against both of each other, and the other groups would either bet on one on the other. Yeah? So you can have fun with teaching other people, because it was actually, I must say, perhaps I'm a bit of a sadist, but it was fun to observe them struggling, I must say, honestly. So you are the mentor, step aside. Number of times you will see that they are about to make a really silly mistake. And the hard part, for me at least, was to let them. I had to let them make this mistake so that they will later remember. And even perhaps point them out like, well, what do you think of the return type of this method? Yeah, and then, okay, it cannot be this type because otherwise I will not be able to employ the list API. Yeah? Things like that. It's easy to spot them and correct them as you go, but if you're not pressed for time, don't do it. Don't offer them easy answers, but offer them answers like just outside of their reach, so that they struggle a bit, and then they obtain it. And they will value that answer much more. The problem is you can actually go overboard with this behavior, and like they will never be able to obtain it, and you will just push it and push it and push it, and this is, yeah. Whatever you do, you will be accused by your students of doing the latter thing all the time. Get used to it. Involve them. This is the old thing. If you actually allow them to experience the thing, they will remember it much, much better. Exams, tests, checks, interviews, and the like. People are saying that they hate exams. I had a couple of people who were like, but I finished my college degree. Why do I need to bother with further exams? And I was like, you don't. You completely don't. But I do believe that exams make you motivated, and they are giving me a good assessment of your knowledge, and I need the assessment of your knowledge. If you're able to propose me an alternative, I'll consider it. Nobody has yet proposed me a sufficient alternative. The alternative they proposed were, for example, drop the exams. You will know if I learned or not. First thing that I learned during my first Java Academy was to answer the question with the question. Tomek, what is actually the int range? Data type int. Well, have you checked in the Java language specification? No. Have you perhaps launched your IDE and verified this yourself? No. Why don't you do that? If they learn to use IDE, if they learn to look for Java language specification, they are much better in future, because there will be a time when you will not be there, and they will not be able to ask you. And the other colleague who will be acting as your substitute replacement Google proxy will also be unavailable for a reason. And then they'll end up searching in Google, or they'll end up knowing how to check it. And knowing how to check it is much, much better. So make them use the IDE, make them follow your preferable sources. It may be Java language specification, it may be Stack Overflow, it may be something else. But really do make them use it. After some time, when I did that, they were asking me questions and they, wait, yes, I know, I'll check with Java language specification. Yeah? So one or 1.5 of a week is enough for them to actually realize that you will not budge, so they will have to actually do it on their own. Now, object-oriented first, BlueJ is actually excellent for that. BlueJ is an IDE by researchers and academics from Kent University. It actually does two things in an excellent manner. It deals away with the main problem completely, because if you want them to use any program, they'll have to actually write the main method. In the main method, they'll probably write imperative code. So to avoid that, to avoid actually starting to explain the static context, the main itself, why it's the main signature like so, and why it cannot be any other, you can actually deal all of that away if you actually go for BlueJ. So BlueJ is, first of all, it visualizes your object. So if your object extends something, if it implements something, if it plain uses something, you will have a UML-like diagram which tells you about it. Okay, and this is pretty much nice thing, because when you're teaching objects-oriented code, don't do it in a procedural style. You don't want that. So the other nice capability of BlueJ is the fact that you're able to actually call your methods with graphical user interface without the main. So your the concepts that they have to actually learn at first are becoming smaller and smaller. Because let's face it, Java is not a very good first language to learn, really. If you're having a person who's starting with their programming career, make them learn Python, make them learn, I don't know, something procedural. Sorry, not procedural, actually functional is what I meant. Scrap this procedural, don't kill me for it. So make them learn something functional, make them learn something, easier like Python, and do not make them learn Java, because Java is very verbose. As this verbosity helps as you go along, but at first it's a lot to get into. And interview with a gallery. This is something that also worked tremendously well, because at first they were stressed. Okay, I told them the exams will be monthly. Every month there will come a guy totally from outside. You don't know him, I don't know him, and he will be your interviewer. And he will be actually talking with you as he would with any other candidate trying to get into the company. And he will tell you whether he would accept you or not and why. And of course, he will tell me the same thing as well. So with this, I actually, outsourced the examining, and it was totally independent of whatever I was doing. If I had any bias towards any student, I was actually out of the loop of grading, which was pretty much what I wanted. So on the other hand, they stopped, any incentive of trying to, weasel into my good graces for the sake of upcoming exam. Problem solved. Now, the final thing that I did there was that I actually started conducting interviews with a gallery. Like, now, you and you, we will have a short interview, 15 minutes, basics of Java, in 5 minutes. Whoever wants to actually watch will be in this and that room. And at first, it was like everybody would stand up and go to watch how I interview people. And then it was actually, gradually people would fill out. Yeah? They would actually stop doing that because they already knew some kind of the questions. So if you, with this, reinforce what you're going to ask, what are the important concepts, it's a great way for them to actually remember them. It's a great way for them also to then go to the interview and later come back and tell you, it was pretty easy, yours were harder. So this was pretty much what I wanted. So at first they were totally discouraged. After a few interviews, they were like, this is totally too harsh. I can't do it. It's incredible. I never even heard about those concepts that you ask about. I was like, yes, I know. And they would be angry about it. But upon seeing that their anger doesn't work, and it doesn't make me ask the easy questions, they would start researching what is it that I was talking about. And for example, some of them stumbled upon integer caches that way. Some of them stumbled upon string pool that way. So they were able to find their way into problems which otherwise I would have to prepare the materials for them. I think you've seen this slide. No, experience, okay. Experience tramples all, as in, there is this famous quote, involve me and I learn. Yeah, if you just tell them about something, some will remember, some will forget, but this will be, an information they got on an intellectual level. If you actually show them, show always makes things more interesting, so they are more likely to remember. But if you make them find about it the hard way, this is the experience. The Buddhist people, they're actually claiming experience tramples all, and I fully agree. You need to wield the authority. If you do not wield the authority, you will not actually be able to talk with the people. Because sometimes telling them this is not college is not working. You need to show that this is not college. On some level, they understand it, but they're so used to the fact that college looks like it looks, and that during college, if you do a student project, you do it the same way. Like, for example, I have 1 week, let's leave it for Friday. Yeah, and on Friday, I'm working on it pretty intensely, don't bother me. Yeah? So the way I actually handle that is, at some point, the first time I wielded this, I actually used this on the introverts. So I decided to be pretty cruel to the introverts. I gathered all them around, and I was like, okay, folks, I know that you have problems. I don't know why you have problems. I would like you to come up with a way to inform me about it, because I tried this and that and that, and I'm out of ideas. Without knowing what your problem is, I cannot help you. Therefore, at the end of the academy, if you do not tell me what is the problem, I will honestly have to not recommend you to any project. Because I cannot recommend a person whom I do not know. And then the introverts all of a sudden started acting, okay? On their own terms, but they started telling me what I could do to make them understand. And the problem was, if I would not wield the authority, nothing would have happened. And at the end of the course, I would actually have lost majority of the introverts. Being too lenient. So at some point I gave them the task, and they were unable to complete the task, to deliver the task on time. So I prolonged the time. So the thing repeated. So I prolonged the time. When I prolonged the time for the third time, I was like, how the hell is this task taking so long? So I talked to few people who managed to end it, and they were like, no, don't ask us this question. This is really uncomfortable. We shouldn't be talking about it. Let's change the subject. And then I was like, okay, but I cannot move with the course material because everybody is doing this task. My group is falling apart because I don't know what can I do with them because they haven't finished a fairly simple task. So what's the problem? And then they were like, well, because people are taking their sweet time with it. Yeah, because they could. I gave them the opportunity, and I never questioned them like why they didn't deliver on time. So had I questioned them, had I actually worked closer with them, I would have realized that myself. But there was 19 people and one myself, so unfortunately I didn't do it. So in the end, at a couple of hours later, I gathered everybody and I told them that the final date for the task is tomorrow, because they already had a couple of days. And I want a working version with following requirements, which they already knew. And suddenly, everybody started working, and the next day, majority of the group finished the task. All right, guessing. This ties with retrospectives and questions. A couple of times I found myself assuming that the problem with person X is this. Because of prior associations, because of something that I did in the past, because of something that person did in the past, I assumed, I guessed. Actually, rarely this was for the good. So, in my terms, what doesn't help in teaching is guessing. All right. If you have materials and the connection between them is not obvious, you need to make it obvious. So for example, I told them about Git, I told them about Maven. But without experiencing how hard it is to actually, add the dependencies by hand, they were like, why do we need to actually learn Maven? Why do we need to learn Git? We're not using it. And they weren't using it because they were working in solo projects. 2 weeks later, when they were working in groups of 4, everybody knew why they need Maven and Git. But at first, I made the connection not obvious, and they were reluctant to learn. Tools too late. I made the mistake of not showing them Git when I actually gave them the first project to complete. They completed the first project. They sent it to me in various ways. Emails, zip, USB stick, you name it. I even had an FTP share on some private server with the task, So checking this is like you're all over the place. Okay, next person is this, no email. I don't seem to have his USB stick. Oh yes, this was the guy with FTP server. Yeah. So this seems minor, and it really is minor, but actually think of it like that. If testing one of their project is 40 minutes, that means that for 10 people, it's 400 minutes, okay? Now add to that some extra minutes for how this guy actually submitted the task and whether this task is executed in this way or that way, whether the main class is called like this or like that, whatever. So if you don't make them actually go extra step, use Git, use Maven, use scripts to run, which actually are same for everybody, then you will have troubles. So introducing tools too late. Starting with main pretty much never worked. Also, if you start with procedural code, like at some point I had a group who was weak with coding in general, so I actually gave them coding bot tasks to complete. They did this, but the motivation actually dropped very, very fast because they were tedious. And when, during retrospective, there is a lot of complaints about something, but you don't see any basis for them, any real basis for them, except for this is uncomfortable. If this repeats for the second retrospective, it's good to actually not give in and, you know, offer some comeback. Like, okay, what are your exact reasons for this? And list them and actually try to show why you're doing this. If you give in to complaints, the problem becomes very simple. You're pulling them down, okay? What you want is to pull your group up. Actually, that's, sorry, what you want, what I want. I always want to pull the group up because I want them to be better. I want them to be really cool people who will be going to any project and they will succeed. So if I pull them down like, okay, this is too hard, let's, you know, scale it down, sometimes this is the good way to go. But for now, I want to pull them up always. And prolonged trial period. This is the #1 reason why Java Academy helps with pretty much anything when it comes to recruitment, okay? You're getting to know that person very, very well. And also, let's face the things very, very straight. Who here has never been annoyed by the fact that you as a junior were looking for work and everybody wanted experienced people? I want a junior with 2 years of experience. Excellent. How does the junior get the 2 years of experience? Yeah. So the problem becomes really, you know, like a closed circle. If you don't give opportunities like that, you will never have a good and well-educated junior because let's face it, number of computer science courses are like, I'm having 2 semesters, one with Java and the other with C and C++. C and C++. Now, imagine how great one will be after finishing, what, 50 hours of programming with lectures in 3 languages per 1 year? That's nothing. So if you don't actually step up, if you don't offer opportunities yourself, if you do not implement such a program, then next time when you will have a weak guy coming in and claiming he already worked as a junior for 1 year, why don't you accept him as a regular or even senior, then that's on you, not on the guy, because that's the actual reality. If the recruitment is allowed to say, we want juniors with 2 years of experience, then why is junior not allowed to say he wants to be a senior because he has 3 years of experience? Equally outrageous. Public relationship, of course. You teach them what you decide to teach them, what is important. If you believe that object-oriented is not really the Java style, that actually in Java you need to learn just a bit to jump into Scala because Scala is so utterly cool. Cool, go with this. I'm certain that if you feel passionate about it, you can actually make them see this and you can make them do this. So you're shaping them as you want your programmers around you and in your teams. You get loyalty because you spend time working with them and helping them. And this creates a bond. So the problem, Japanese people are having a very nice saying about that, that there are 2 debts which you will never repay. One to your parents and the other to your teacher. And even in our culture, very different from Japanese, there is something. If you see this teacher who really gave his all to teach you, despite you saying it's cumbersome, it's unwieldy, you don't want that, and when you later benefit from his teachings, that brings in loyalty. And the last point, which is the most important for me, is this is changing my world for the better. I'm teaching people who will later work most likely in Kraków, perhaps in your companies. And I want them to be good. Because later, when you will start teaching them, and they will come work, for example, for me. And I want them to be good as well. So this is all. I'm open for questions. Thank you very much.
I was wondering if this Java Academy works as a part of a larger company, or is it your own enterprise?
As a part of a larger company at this moment.
All right, that answered my question, because you said you pay people, so I thought
yes.
How you pay your bills, but if you're part of an enterprise.
I would like to actually have this, as a part of something I would own, and I would, dedicate myself to, but this is not yet the level. What stops me, beside obvious financial problems, is that my program is not yet that great that I would have trust to actually, go with this and make it happen. Also, right now, if they are hired by my current employer, then I can actually get them, to find jobs later.
From our experience, I think there are two kinds of people, people of the must and the people of the opportunity. How do you manage to work with them? You create some groups, some mix, or something like this?
So, people of opportunity, that's a very nice phrase. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to find out what is that motivates them. Okay? I usually try to do this during even the initial recruitment. Like, why would you want to be here? Why would you want to learn? What's your aim? In 3 months, what you want to do? And then I'm trying to work with them, acknowledging that they're not really, on the level of motivation that the art historian, yeah, because he was unique, let's face it. But on the other hand, I'm also pushing forward with this opportunity. Like, you really want to do this? You need to have this and that and that. Let's be adults here. You do this? You're fine, you're cleared. So this is one way, to show them the minimum that they need to obtain, no matter what, where I will not yield. And if they deliver me this, I'm giving them, their calm place and peace of mind, yeah? So no, I said it well, yeah, I think. So the other way is if they don't. Then again, it becomes the opportunity for you to wield the authority. Because if you do not, make no mistake, you're the last person to know that this is the person of opportunity. Everybody who works with them, everybody whom you paired this guy with, they already know it. They're just, being misguided. This is the misguided loyalty of not rattling on your teammates. Yeah, even though actually you should. So you're not rattling on your teammates, so you're actually having this, and you're having this problem. So you need to wield the authority on this guy. All right. Thank you very much. I'm available, so you can catch me later if you have more questions or private questions. And once again, thank you for coming.